We have Elizabeth Elsie of Allen, Texas.
All right, Elizabeth Elsie, congratulations. You are a recipient of a $50 gift card to All Smiles Dentistry.
All right, congratulations. Thank you for coming out and giving blood. That was that's the best gift of all.
Boy, that really is true. I'll tell you. Well, folks, we're going to run to break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking with Dr. Norm Clothier in regards to, am I sick and really should I probably go to work today even, or should I go out to that Christmas party or to my family's home for Christmas? So stay tuned. We are KEXB 620 AM. In fact, hand that to Callie. We will let Callie contact these folks.
Well, fantastic.
I looked over at Callie. I thought she had something to say.
Yeah,
I had a
panic
question,
look on her
but then
face.
we moved on.
Oh,
okay.
I was just going to say, how do we know if
Hey,
it's
Sharavius, when we hit
allergies
2
or
minutes,
if
can you
we're
let us know in our
Okay,
earpiece,
I
please?
will.
Because I always just assume that it's allergies
Yeah.
because the weather's changing.
And odds are good.
No, 2 minutes going into break, and then right
Symptoms are
before when we
very
come out of
similar.
break,
We can talk
if you'll
about
let us know, like you normally do, we're coming back.
And then I'll talk a little bit about specifics like visiting an elderly relative or a baby or something. We'll talk about that.
What other things can you pass on?
Oh, your money.
So I know,
Yeah.
well, you can pass your money on.
Oh, yeah. Well, we tend to
So-
talk about virus and bacteria. Fungal infections are much less likely to spread, like the typical fungus in the skin, like ringworm, whatever.
Right.
But classically, it tends to be things that get on a hand, picked up like from an eye, or things that are coughed. It's amazing if you ever look at a video like of cough particles.
Spit 'em.
If I cough in here once, it fills the room.
Now, is that,
It's
I
not
watched
like
them.
just
what is the
there's a
official-
little bit of sputum is
Sputum,
really
okay, that's what I
thick
thought.
mucus is the way I think of it.
Okay.
What you're really talking about is just airborne particles.
Okay.
Because when we breathe in and out, things move, and we're talking about microscopic bacteria and viruses that we're not going to see.
I watched a
If you
video
call it, yeah.
in college, and it was like slow motion, this girl sneezing, and she's even covering her mouth and sneezing,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you not want to touch anything for the
Yeah.
rest of your life.
Oh,
It
I know,
fills
it's
the
amazing.
room.
It
it's
does.
like
It-
snow. It's
Yeah,
like,
it diffuses everywhere.
It's so nasty.
It really does, and that's why I get the question all the time: how could I have gotten sick? And
Yeah.
I think if you're alive,
Thank
you get
you.
sick. That's just
On the
way
coming
it,
back,
unless
just
you're
do it
mean,
like you
then
used to
don't
do
get
it.
sick.
20 seconds or 30
Yeah,
seconds,
yeah,
you would
that's
say,
my
I think,
plan.
or
But
or
it's-
stand by, I think you would say.
It's very challenging though, because it is everywhere. So you hope for a good immune system, and that really is just being healthy in general, and to a large degree, just being blessed with good health. If your immune system attacks things well, that's a great thing.
I often thought that it must be tough to be a physician, and because you are exposed.
Oh,
that's why
every
they come
day.
to you.
Yeah, every day, and people cough all over me,
And,
and one reason we wear a white coat is theoretically to keep it off of other surfaces.
Mhm.
It's highly theoretical,
But it
So
sounds
that's
good.
an OSHA rule to keep, the airborne particles and stuff to a minimum. But it's a continual exposure. I think we form continual immunity because of that.
Mhm.
So it's very classic as you start into medicine to be sick all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
until you build up. Yeah, that's why I get flu shot and all, and I'll mention that briefly too, to minimize the spread of illness
Absolutely.
and getting it.
I went through, my mother-in-law passed on Saturday morning.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
to hear that.
Go into my
She's
email
97.
and pull up
Hospice was great.
JP for JP
I'm
at
glad they
gmail.com.
All the
And then pull up
systems,
the
and things that were
commercial
happening when
edit
she shut it down.
that was
It
done for
really
Carrollton
I'm glad
Springs.
they
It's
took
going to
good
be
care
under
of her,
Robin.
and you.
great. Yeah.
And it should be
Sorry to
three or
hear
four.
you. My brother-in-law died Saturday, actually, my wife's sister's husband.
When was
Thank
it?
you. Should be towards
So-
the top.
Bad day Saturday for that, I guess.
It was
Yeah.
either.
But I'm glad they took care of it.
Yesterday,
That's
day
right,
before
the key is
yesterday.
I see it.
a peaceful
I want to
passing.
pull that up. Here we go. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, if you're hearing the bells ring, that means it's Christmas time on the porch. It's almost here. And knocking at your door or at your chimney is old Santa Claus, good old Saint Nick. And so if you're sick, don't pass that on to good old Saint Nick. He's got a lot of kids to go out there and help take care of. Right, Dr. Clothier?
Yeah, he seems only get sick in movies. I haven't known him in person to get sick, but
well,
he's never come see me, actually.
It's just good that you know him in person.
Absolutely.
I bet your kids were so much better off as a result of your close relationship. But no antibiotics you've ever had to give him, huh?
No. Never once.
No antibiotics. I'll be darned. Well, Dr. B, how about you? Any counseling for old Saint Nick?
Well, no, I think he's doing fine just by himself.
By himself.
You know, I've never seen him when I've had to go to the doctor. I've never seen him in the waiting room with us, you know, or anything. So
yeah, we see him off hours at his
off
convenience.
hours.
He's one of those VIP guys. We want to keep on the good side.
He's a VIP.
Yeah, I don't want to be on that list. He has to check more than twice. You know,
yeah. Right. I'll tell you. Well, folks, the Family Healthcare segment is brought to you by Family Healthcare Associates. They have a doctor for all your family needs, from prenatal to seniors. Family Healthcare Associates at FHCATX.com. That's FHCATX.com. And we're talking about, am I sick and what should I really do with that? And so, Dr. Clothier, what about, employers and folks during this time of season where they really need their people at work? Do we find that illness is up and that people are probably not going to work as much?
Well, it's a sicker time of year statistically in the winter. I think we see a lot more from Thanksgiving to spring break than we do from, say early summer break to the end of the summer break. And a lot of that is being indoors more and being together. A lot of it's the weather fronts that come through. It's just a typical time of year. And of course, it's the time of year that the influenza, tends to blow into town literally on weather fronts. And the reason the flu shot is designed the way it is based on world patterns of influenza strains that tend to be on the literal other side of the world first and then blow over here in weather fronts during the wintertime. So that's, those are all predictable illnesses. So part of the challenge is staying healthy enough to work. And you're right, employers need their employees there. So typically, if you can work on exercise and good nutrition, hand washing, try to minimize the illness risk as much as you can. Get your flu shot, take care of yourself. That helps. Once you develop, though, an illness, it really is the right thing, if you have a fever, to be away from people the best you can for about 24 hours after that fever breaks, so that you don't just spread it everywhere.
We've got a listener that has chimed in on our social media, and they have a question out of the Austin area, Liberty Hill, Texas, actually. The question is, what's your opinion on ionic silver? Evidently, they use it in a 1,000,000-part form spray in the mouth, and they have noticed that when people are getting sick, or if they're starting to feel like they're getting sick, they'll use that, and they haven't had a cold in 3 years, they say. What do you think about that?
I think it's good to have a good immune system, and I think it's hard to find studies that actually show that makes a difference. There are a number of things, using early decongestants, using zinc early, which is the idea on several products over the counter that are lozenges or pills that have zinc in them. Zinc, actually, if you take it in the mouth and let it dissolve, which tastes awful, but it does seem to head off a cold, can work. And I think that very likely is heading off some colds, but there just aren't studies that really clearly document that that's the case. One challenge I find is much of the time when someone tries something for 2 or 3 or 4 days, let's say one of the over-the-counter products to try to head off a cold, is that the typical cold lasts about 2, 3, or 4 days. And it's very hard to say whether that actually has shortened the illness or if it's sort of let you ride through the illness and, hopefully you don't get a secondary infection from that. So it's kind of hard, and I feel the same way sometimes about antibiotics. I feel like sometimes if we treat something and somebody's better in 3 days, we don't know that they wouldn't have been better in 3 days. We can look at the statistical odds of that, and we can look at the idea behind treatment, but it's very hard to say they wouldn't just clear it with their own immune system too.
Well, now I've got a question about that, though, because I've always been curious about, well, do I just ride this thing out, or does the medicine really help get rid of these things? I'll take Advil. Let's say I've got a fever, and the Advil at least makes me feel better. It seems to bring my temperature down to normal. Now, it doesn't mean that 4 hours later my temperature is not going back up again.
Absolutely.
But did that Advil provide me comfort? I mean, did it provide me a 4-hour stay from having that fever, whether it helped it get rid of it or not?
You want something controversial?
I do.
here's the issue. I think that the makers of Tylenol and Advil have made people afraid of a fever. And I think that fever is the body's natural way to handle infection. And if you are not literally having a problem with the fever, meaning too long, getting too dehydrated, or if you're a young child running the risk of a febrile seizure, then it's actually better to have the fever than to try to suppress the fever, because you're absolutely right. It may work for about 4 hours, maybe 6 hours, but your body's reflex to kill the infection will then kick in again. And that reflex is to form white blood cells, which forms fever, which kills the infection. So for most adults, and most anybody over maybe 5 or 6 years old, I think it's actually better to have the fever and try to kill the illness and try to put up with those symptoms. And you really got to drink water, stay hydrated if you have a fever, because you'll lose body water from the higher temperature. But the typical adult doesn't run trouble with fever unless it's over about 103.5 for more than 24 hours. That's not typically the type of fever people have. So for a high fever, I think it's reasonable to bring it down. If you can basically fight through that, it's actually probably better for your immune system.
And in most cases, the flu or even a cold or that type of thing, you won't run temperature that high usually, though, will you?
Well, with the flu, yes. The flu, almost by not by strict criteria of definition, but typically there's fever over about 102.5 and chills and dry cough. One point confusion I find is people confuse a stomach bug or a stomach virus with the flu. People tend to say, oh, I have the stomach flu. Well, the flu is influenza, is a respiratory virus, so it tends to be dry cough that's almost unstopped. I mean, it's just an incessant cough. High fever, chills, and people tend to describe it as feeling like they've been hit by a truck or hit by a ton of bricks. So with influenza, you often have very rapid onset of high fever. With a cold, it's actually rather unusual to have a fever.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Clothier, I guess my other question is then, do we let this thing run its course? What about showing up at a party, I feel all mucousy, I don't have a fever, I don't have the pressure in my face where I know it's a sinus type of a pressure, but I'm just kind of mucousy, my throat's a little bit sore and scratchy. I mean, do I need to stay home? Do I need to take some medicine or ride it out with some hot tea and some water? What do I need to do?
I do think warm fluids help soothe the throat and thin mucus. You need to drink plenty of water or something with quite a bit of water like tea to help the mucus thin out. And I do think something that's like a mucolytic to thin mucus helps. But if there's no fever, I actually think it's okay to be there. And the reason is that type of infection that you're describing is really within you. It's because you've had mucus build up for a few days, whether from allergies or cold, and then it sits there stagnant for a few days. So the comparison I use is like if you have water in your backyard, you might get a little algae and a few mosquitoes, whatever. It kind of just gets infected basically by those things. And if you have mucus sitting in your sinus system, it's going to get infected at some point, statistically speaking. So, but that's really within yourself if you don't have fever.
Well, then that answers my question. Because I'm the queen of allergies. Every time the weather changes, I get allergies, and it is horrible. And I always question, should I call into work? Or
right.
Is it
I'd say
okay?
with no fever, I think it's fine. If you're, I think you still want to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
You want to wash your hands and not intentionally, get things right on people. But I think it's okay as long as you have basically clear mucus and sneezing and congestion, as opposed to fever or big lymph nodes that you can feel in your neck and things that clearly are a different type of symptom than hay fever or allergies. Hay fever is that common term we use for allergies that just is because of particles in the air. So usually that would be clear mucus and sneezing instead of anything more noticeable than that. I do want to address a couple of specific groups. If you're going to see a newborn baby, I get that question a lot as to what you should do. Babies actually have very good immunity from their moms, so-called maternal antibodies. They're not real likely to get sick, but what they can get sick with is pertussis or whooping cough. We do recommend everyone, they'll be around a newborn baby, have a tetanus shot that is a Tdap, a tetanus, diphtheria, and acellular pertussis, because the baby won't be immunized till age 2 months, and pertussis can be fatal to a newborn. It can cause a 100-day cough in adults, and we see a lot of pertussis in North Texas. So it's important to get the immunization and try not to infect a newborn baby. And a flu shot's a good idea if you're around a newborn because they can't get a flu shot either. And